Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Adeptus Mechanicus Common Patrol, including both the rules and what the contents are of the box set. And before we jump into the video, if you haven't seen the previous videos where we go over the different units in the index for the Adeptus Mechanicus, do check those out and I'll leave a description in the link below. Anyway, with that being said, let's jump right into this video. To begin with, I think the Common Patrol is a great place to start for any army, regardless of which army, as it gives you quite a good value. So let's take a look at what the contents are of the Common Patrol. The Common Patrol box for the Adeptus Mechanicus comes with 4 different units, and that being an Engine Seer, which would normally run you $35, a box of 10 Skitarii, which would run you $55, a box of Cataphrons, which would normally run you $60, and an Onager Doomcrawler, which would run you $80 by itself. And if you add all this up, you end up with a grand total of $230. If you think about it this way, the Common Patrol would cost you about $160, so you're saving $70 total, which means you're essentially getting one of those units for free. However, do keep one thing in mind, that the Engine Seer is a little bit overpriced at $35, so it's a little bit of a shaky thing. That being said, you can find these box sets and many others for a 15% discount at websites such as VentureTradeCo.com, which I'll leave a link to in the description down below as well. And if you shop there, you do help support the channel, which does help me out and gets you a little bit of a discount in the process. Anyway, with that being said, I do think the Common Patrol has definitely gotten a rather strong boost within 10th edition, as all of the units are very usable, and I think that Engine Seer is much more impressive in 10th edition than it is within 9th edition, and the Cataphrons and Onager are very good as well. However, the Skitarii have definitely gone down in power a bit, but you still do want to play at least 1 or 2 units of them in most armies, just to confer the benefits they provide to other units and gain a little bit of the benefits they have in themselves. That being said, if you're just starting out with Adeptus Mechanicus, I do think you can very safely buy 2 Common Patrol boxes and have a rather good start for your army. That second Engine Seer isn't particularly great, but you can always convert him into something like a Techno-Archaeologist or a different type of Tech Priest with a little bit of work and a little bit of kit bashing, so he does have utility beyond what he is in himself. With that being said, let's take a look at the Common Patrol rules for the Adeptus Mechanicus as they are within 10th edition. The Common Patrol, in this case, is called the Maniple of Vrask Alpha. This Common Patrol built in a very specific way that I think is a little bit bad for new players, as it can lead them down a really bad path. And what I mean by this is the Common Patrol requests that you build the models in a specific configuration, generally matching the box art that you see on the Common Patrol box. So let's take a look at what units you get for the specific game mode, though you're not restricted to building these specific units if you're just buying the box for the models themselves, and you can build them however you want, though if you do play the Common Patrol mode, you do have to build this configuration. The first model you get is a special unit known as Engine Seer Vrask, who's equipped with pretty much what you would expect, having the Mechanicus pistol, the Omniscient axe, and the servo arm, though once we get to his profile we'll see he has a few differences between this incarnation of a special character and what we saw within the regular datasheets. Then after the Engine Seer, you're required to build 10 Skitarii Rangers, and I do think the Rangers are a bit underpowered within 10th edition, so that's already a little bit of a bad start. However, here's where it gets a little worse, as you get a Skitarii Ranger Alpha, 6 regular Skitarii Rangers, 1 equipped with a enhanced data tether, 1 equipped with an arc rifle, and 1 equipped with a transuranic arquebus. As you can see right away, you're missing the plasma gun, and that's a bit of a shame as you get that plasma gun for free in the regular rules, so you're already starting out a little bit behind. And I'll say the data tether is a little less impressive than the Omnispecs in my opinion when you're taking all these special weapons. That being said, the data tether and the Omnispecs look similar enough alike that I don't think many people will give you too much trouble if you make the model have one or the other and use it interchangeably. However, that being said, I do think the lack of the plasma caliber is a big downside, as all of a sudden it's asking you to build your units in a less efficient way than you would if you were playing a regular game, and that's a really big shame. This issue persists on with the Cataphron Destroyers, who you build instead of the Breachers, which I already don't like, as I think the Breachers are a better unit and better exemplify how the Adeptus Mechanicus want to play within the 10th edition rules, so all of a sudden having to build Destroyers right off the bat makes your army weaker once again, and I think that's a bit of a disservice that Games Workshop did to the players who are buying this box set and are using these rules when starting out the game. Not only that, but you're required to build 1 Destroyer with a heavy grav cannon and 2 Destroyers with their plasma culverins. This is a really weird mix, and in addition to that, you're putting a Phosphor Blaster on the Cataphrone Destroyer with the Grav Cannon, and Cognis Flamers on the ones with the Plasma Culverins. And that being said, the Cognis Flamer and the Phosphor Blaster are perfectly fine, it's just kind of a little bit of a weird mix, and I'd really recommend anyone building the Cataphrone Destroyers to magnetize them so you can swap them out, and potentially even use them as Cataphrone Breachers in the future, as it's rather easy as you just have to magnetize 2 different sets of arms, and you can kind of leave the rest of the body as it is, even if they look a little bit different than they would otherwise. And then finally we have the 4th unit within this box, being the Onager Doomcrawler. The Onager Doomcrawler comes equipped with a Daedalus Missile Launcher, a Cognis Heavy Stubber, and an Icarus Array. and this is perfectly fine. I do think I personally prefer the Icarus Array, though once again you should always magnetize larger models such as this, as you never know when those weapons can change, and you end up preferring a different weapon than the one you've equipped it with. And do remember, when you're magnetizing models, you don't have to paint and build all of the choices right away. You can build the choice you want to use, and then later come back to it and build the other choice that you're not using in that situation. In either case, I do think this configuration is rather bad for new players, as it really encourages them to build suboptimal units, and I think a lot of players just getting into the game might end up building their units this way, and then realize when they go to play a larger game of 2,000 points, that they all of a sudden need to kind of scramble to find a couple other units that they can build out in a more useful manner. That being said, you can always build out other units that you acquire later on with the bits you have left over from these, so that you have a little bit more flexibility, and if you magnetize the Cataphrone Destroyers, as well as Honor Dragoon Crawler, you'll have a pretty easy time transitioning when the time comes. So let's take a look at the special rules that the Comm Patrol mana pool has specifically. The first thing we come to is that the Comm Patrol does benefit from the Doctrine Imperatives, just like a regular Adeptus Mechanicus force. However, do notice that it's not a rad cohort, so it does not benefit from the special rules and enhancements that the rad cohort does, so it does have its own special enhancements and stratagems that it can utilize. The only enhancement you have access to is one that can go on the engine seer, which is the Warlord of your force, and you have a choice of 2 different enhancements for that engine seer. The first of those enhancements is Omniballistic Data Tether, which says each time the bearer's unit is selected to shoot, you can reroll 1 hit roll and you can reroll 1 wound roll when resolving those attacks. So depending on what units he can lead, this does become better or worse in that situation. We'll find out later what units he can lead once we take a look at his data card. As for the second enhancement that you can choose from, that is the Imperative Surge Wafer. The Imperative Surge Wafer says, once per battle when the bearer's unit is selected to shoot, it can use this ability if it does until the end of the phase. Range weapons equipped by models in that bearer's unit have the Precision ability. And that's actually very powerful if he can lead those Cataphrons. Though I'll say right now, I don't think that's the case, as I think that might be a little too powerful in that situation, so we'll have to wait and see, but if he can lead the Cataphrons, having the ability to give precision weapons onto those Plasma Culverins is rather strong, so that's definitely an option to consider. Now, in addition to the special enhancements, the specific detachment type for the Comm Patrol has its own secondary objectives for scoring points within the game. There are 2 different secondary objectives you can choose from, the first one being the Explorator's Acquisition. This objective says, from the second battle round onward at the end of your command phase, roll 1d6, adding 1 to the results for each objective marker you control. On a 7+, a piece of valuable Archaeotech is found and you score 4 victory points. You cannot score more than 12 victory points from the secondary objective. This seems like an okay objective, but I do think it's a little weaker than it first appears, as you have to think about, with the limited units that you're running, being those 4 different units that you gain access to, you are going to have a hard time controlling more than 2 objectives at any time, so you're going to be trying to struggle and roll at least a 5+ in most situations. In other situations, you might only score the objective points if you roll a 6, simply because you only have access to 1 objective. If you can consistently at least control 3 objectives, you're probably already winning the game, and in that case, you only go up to a 50-50 chance of scoring those additional 4 victory points. So I definitely think this is kind of a weaker secondary objective, but do remember that those Rangers do potentially have the sticky objective ability. However, we'll have to see if that's the case once we look at the datasheet. But even with that ability, I don't think this is a particularly strong secondary objective, and I think it's a bit of a trap objective, so let's see what the other choice you have for secondary objectives, and if it's better than this objective. The other option you have for secondary objectives is the Holy Apparatus. The Holy Apparatus says the following: at the end of the battle, you score 4 victory points if the Warlord is not destroyed. You also score 4 victory points if your Honor Dragoon Crawler model is not destroyed and is not below half strength at the time. You also score 2 victory points if your Honor Dragoon Crawler model is not destroyed but is below half strength. So it looks like you have a total of 10 victory points you can score by using this secondary objective, and it decays by 4 if your engine seer is destroyed, and it decays by 4 if your Honor Dragoon Crawler goes below half strength, and decays by another additional 2 if your Honor Dragoon Crawler is destroyed. I do think this is a better choice than the first secondary objective, as the Honor Dragoon Crawler can be rather tanky, and the Warlord can lead a unit, thus gaining himself some additional protection. So even though the cap in terms of the victory points you can score with the secondary objective is lower than the other option, I do think it's a better choice and an easier one to score some points off than the first one, where you're hoping to roll a 6 in most situations, and sometimes you might get lucky and have to roll a 5+ or a 4+, and that's a rather hard place to be in. So I would say if you're good at protecting your models, this is definitely the choice to go with, and the one I would probably go with if I'm playing a combat patrol game using the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now there are 3 special stratagems that you get for being within this combat patrol, and the first of those is the Retribution Codes. This stratagem costs 1 command point and can be used at any phase. And the target of this model is 1 Tech Priest model from your army that was just destroyed by an attack made by an enemy model. This means this is only usable once your engine seer is destroyed, which is a pretty bad place to be in, so it should be rather powerful in terms of what you get for the effect. The effect that you get is, until the end of the battle, each time an Adeptus Mechanicus model from your army makes an attack that targets that enemy model's unit, reroll a hit roll of 1. Okay, that's not particularly as powerful as I was kinda expecting it, as it only affects one enemy unit and only affects hit rolls of 1. That being said, if you're playing against a more elite style of army that does have a limited number of units, and your engine seer is destroyed by a rather large and powerful unit from your opponent, this might have some merit in that all of a sudden you can get a lot more consistency in targeting that unit. Though in most situations you're really hoping that you're not going to be using this specific stratagem, so consider it as basically a blank stratagem in most situations. The second stratagem you get access to is the Reactive Field Shroud. This stratagem will cost you 1 command point, and the timing for this stratagem is when your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. The target of the stratagem is a Tech Priest or a Skitarii unit from your army that's been selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. And the effect that you gain from this stratagem is that until the end of the phase, models in your unit have a 4+ invulnerable save. That's actually rather powerful, and considering how few units you have within the comp patrol, this can definitely go a very long way, even though it can only really target the Skitarii Rangers. So I do think this is a rather powerful ability, and one you're pretty much going to be using as your go-to when playing this comp patrol rules. And now the last of the stratagems is the Retrogradal Targeting. This stratagem costs a whopping 2 command points, which is very expensive, so you'd better be getting something rather good. This says that in your movement phase, after the Tech Priest unit from your army ends a fallback move, you can select the unit of the Tech Priest, and until the end of the turn, the unit is eligible to shoot in the turn that it fell back. If you need to fall back and shoot, this is definitely a decent enough stratagem, though 2 command points is kind of pricey, and it's definitely made worse by the fact that you don't have that Plasma Caliber on your Ranger unit, as I'm assuming that's the one you're going to be using, due to how the data cards play out within the comp patrol, so it's a bit of a shame that you're not able to use this on the Cataphrone Destroyers. Anyway, with that being said, let's move on and take a look at the data cards themselves for the comp patrol units. The first of those data cards that we come to is the special character known as Engine Seer Verisk, and as mentioned before, Engine Seer Verisk is armed in the way that a normal Engine Seer is, however he does have a few different rules than he would within the normal datasheet. The first thing we'll notice is he can only lead a unit of Skitarii Rangers, so he cannot lead those Cataphrone Destroyers, which is a big shame, as a lot of the abilities he has would really benefit those Cataphrone Destroyers. Going back to the enhancement he has a choice of, all of a sudden the second enhancement isn't particularly good, as the precision shots of those Rangers isn't going to be as effective in most situations in comparison to those rerolls that you can get on their basic weapons, not to mention that the Transuranic Arquebus already has the precision ability, unless they've changed it for the comp patrol, and in addition to that, you're lacking that Plasma Caliber, so you're only really getting the benefits of precision on that arc rifle, which is a little bit of a shame. And yes, you do get it on the regular galvanic rifles as well. However, at the weak strength and no armor penetration that they have, the only characters you're going to be taking out are going to be rather weak characters. So at the end of the day, I'd rather go with the first enhancement, the one that gives you the ability to get some rerolls, than I would with the other options, and the fallback stratagem is definitely weaker, as you can't use it on Cataphrone Destroyers. And not only that, but he still has his Engine Seer ability, and he has the Omnicized Blessing. However, it does not give a 4+ invulnerable save, though the Doomcrawler has the 4+ invulnerable save naturally, so it doesn't really matter if it loses that part of the ability. However, the Engine Seer in the comp patrol does not have the ability to go berserk like the regular Engine Seer can if a vehicle is destroyed within range of him, so he does lose that benefit as well, meaning that he's been rather nerfed from his regular incarnation. So at the end of the day, that's a bit of a shame, as the Engine Seer already isn't the most powerful unit, and all of a sudden they're making him weaker for the comp patrol rules, so maybe if they're nerfing the other comp patrols as much as they're nerfing this one here, it's probably going to be balanced, but if the other comp patrols kind of retain their full power that they have within their normal data cards, it all of a sudden means that the Adeptus Mechanicus are very weak. However, seeing the changes they made here, I do think the other comp patrols are probably going to be a bit weaker in order to simplify them in the same ways as this one is. Now moving on down to the Rangers have their regular core ability of a 6-inch scout movement. They still benefit from Doctrine Imperatives, but they lose that Sticky Objectives ability, meaning that first secondary objective that you have access to becomes even weaker, and I'll probably always default to the second secondary objective, as that one is much more attainable and much more achievable if you group the Engines here with the Skitarii Rangers, and you can even heal the Doomcrawler a bit. So I do think the second secondary objective is the way to go, due to the fact that you're essentially going to have 3 different units on the battlefield when playing comp patrol, as you're going to be grouping the Engine Seer with either the Rangers or using his lone operative ability to support the Doomcrawler in that situation. So at the end of the day, I do think you're pretty much always going to go with the second secondary, as it's so much more attainable. The Cataphrons also seem to retain their normal weapon profiles, however, they do lose the access to their special ability, which makes them weaker once again, which is a really big shame, considering that they were already weaker than they were within 9th edition, and usually the only reason you built destroyers over breachers in 9th edition was because they cost more points, and the comp patrol for the Adeptus Mechanicus was already struggling to get to the 500 points that it was supposed to get to. So that being said, it's a real shame that you're getting the Cataphons in this nerfed state with the nerfed configuration, as opposed to getting those really nice breachers, and there's going to be a few more thoughts I have at the end of this analysis, but before I get there, let's take a look at the final unit, which is the Onager Doomcrawler. The Onager Doomcrawler appears to be pretty much the same as it is within the regular rule set, unless I'm forgetting something, but all in all, it seems to be pretty good, and it still seems to be rather powerful. It does still have its 4+ normal save and 2+ regular save, as well as a toughness of 10, so it's probably going to be a power unit for the comp patrol missions. So now that we have a full picture of the comp patrol box, let's talk about what I think is good and what I think is bad about the comp patrol box. The first thing is, I'll say the price is very good, and like I said, you can get it at a discount in many websites, such as the one mentioned previously with the link in the description down below. That being said, the other nice thing is it does look like they're really simplifying the rules to make it easy for a new player to get in without having to do a ton of research or thinking when building that army list, so that's a nice thing, and the fact that you get kind of a unique set of rules to play around with and get a feeling for the game, that's also rather nice. Now where the bad comes in is that because it's such a standardized experience, you end up in a situation where you're being told to build models in a very suboptimal way, as I would rather prefer Vanguard over Rangers, and I would build all 3 of those special weapons as you get them for free in the regular rule set, meaning that you're doing yourself a disservice by not building that Plasma Caliber on the squad of Rangers, and it makes some of the other abilities weaker. And not only that, but the Cataphon Breachers are a lot better, in my opinion, than the Cataphon Destroyers, and you're also being told to build the Cataphon Destroyers in kind of a weird configuration. So that being said, I do think the static nature of the box does set up a new player to build their units in a bit of a wrong way, just so that they can match the box art of the comp patrol, which is not a good feeling to have when you go to expand your army and realize you've kind of built your units in an incorrect way if you're looking to be a little bit more competitive. Though if you're more of a casual player, it might not matter at the end of the day, so at least there's that silver lining, but it's also a bad way to kind of get players into the game in that situation. Now the other thing that I'll criticize is that because of the way that your units are configured and some of the limitations of the datasheets, I do think there's only really one choice in the secondary objective and in terms of the enhancement choose, as well as 2 of the stratagems, feeling a bit weaker than they would be if you had other options available to you. Maybe the point of secondaries is to show the player that the one that gives you a higher potential isn't always the best choice, but that seems like a little bit of a weird way to teach a lesson that you could accomplish by giving a player 2 good secondary objectives and having them choose based on how they think the game is going to play out, than having one that seems very much better than the other. So at the end of the day, I think it's a decent step in the right direction. I think there's a lot of interesting concepts, and I hope they kind of refine this, as right now it feels a little bit clunky, and I think there's more bad aspects than there are good aspects. However, it'll be very important for me to see how other comp patrols look like, as the difference between comp patrols might be less than I think it is based on my first impressions of the first comp patrol that I'm looking at, as I don't really have anything to gauge it off against except for itself, which might be giving me a bit of a false impression. And anyway, as always, thank you for watching the video. If you like the video, do like and subscribe for future content, and if you think someone would benefit from this video, do share it with those people as it helps them out. And if you dislike the video, do dislike it and leave a comment down below with your criticism, as it does help improve the content down the line. And as always, thank you for watching, have a great day, see you next time, bye.